Imagine walking into a town in America and realizing you are the only person there. No neighbors. No traffic. No mayor, no city council, because you are all of them at once. Welcome to Monowi, Nebraska, a real-life town that has only one resident. Her name is Elsie Eiler, and she's the mayor, the librarian, the bartender, and yes, the tax collector of her own town. Think about that, she pays taxes to herself. At first glance, it sounds like a comedy sketch, like something out of a sitcom where the main character runs a whole town alone. But no, Monowi is not fiction. It's been recognized by the U.S. Census and by the state of Nebraska as a legally incorporated town. And every year, Elsie has to fill out official paperwork, budget reports, licenses, permits, all for herself. Just picture it, council meetings of one person. The vote is always unanimous. And when people ask, what's the population of Monowi? The official answer is 1. This bizarre reality makes Monowi not just a tiny on the map, but also one of the strangest symbols of American rural life. But how did a town end up with only one resident? Why did everyone leave, and why did Elsie choose to stay behind? Today, we're diving into the story of the loneliest mayor in America, and why people from around the world travel just to meet her. To understand Monowi, we first need to step back in time. Picture the Great Plains of the United States, wide open fields, golden waves of corn, and endless skies stretching to the horizon. This is Nebraska, a state built on agriculture, small towns, and a way of life tied to the land. In the early 1900s, Monowi was like many other rural communities. Farmers settled here, railroads passed nearby, and small businesses popped up to serve the locals. At its peak, Monowi had about 150 residents. It had a post office, a school, a church, and even a few taverns. Life was simple, but it was a community, a place where neighbors knew each other, and kids played in the dirt roads. But like so many rural towns in America, Monowi began to shrink. The younger generation moved to bigger cities, chasing jobs and opportunities. Farms became more industrialized, meaning fewer families were needed to work the land. Slowly, one by one, people packed their bags and left. By the 1970s and 80s, the school closed, businesses shut down, and houses were abandoned. What was once a lively community turned into rows of empty buildings and silent streets. And yet, Elsie and her husband Rudy decided to stay. They ran the Monowi Tavern, the last business in town, serving burgers, beer, and a warm place to gather. When Rudy passed away in 2004, Elsie suddenly found herself not just the last bartender, but the last resident. Monowi, once a town of families, had become a one-woman village. The streets are quiet, the house is long gone, and the only building with life inside is Elsie's Tavern. And yet, Monowi still exists, recognized by law, marked on maps, and attracting curious visitors from around the world. A ghost town with one living soul. So how does a town end up with only one person left? The story of Monowi begins with the American dream of farming families. Back in the early 1900s, small towns like Monowi thrived because of the railroad. Trains carried grain, cattle, and passengers, and every town along the track became a hub of life. Monowi was no different. It had a school for kids, a church on Sunday, and even a few taverns where farmers relaxed after long days. But as the decades passed, the train routes shifted, highways replaced local stops, and people moved toward bigger cities. The heart of Monowi slowly faded. By the 1960s, many of the children who grew up there had already left for college or jobs. Parents sold their farms, stores closed one by one, and Monowi became a shadow of what it once was. Yet Elsie and her husband Rudy decided to stay. They ran the Monowi Tavern, which became the last gathering place in town. Locals, truckers, and travelers would stop by for a burger, a beer, and a chat with the couple. The tavern wasn't just a bar, it was the living room of Monowi. When Rudy passed away in 2004, Elsie suddenly became the last remaining soul. But instead of leaving, she made a decision that shocked many: she would keep Monowi alive. Every year, Elsie holds a council meeting of one, approving her own budget and permits. She applies for federal funds, maintains the village charter, and even writes up her own liquor license, signing both as applicant and clerk. In other words, Elsie isn't just living in Monowi, she is Monowi. And her tavern? It became world famous. Travelers from Japan, Germany, Australia, and across the US have driven hundreds of miles just to sit at her bar. On the shelves, she keeps a guest book filled with signatures and notes from people amazed by her story. Some call her the loneliest mayor in America. But when you step into her tavern, loneliness is the last thing you feel. The bar is alive with laughter, stories, and the warm presence of a woman who carries an entire town on her shoulders. Today, Monowi looks like a ghost town at first glance. The streets are empty, the school is gone, and most of the houses have collapsed or disappeared. Grass grows where sidewalks used to be, and old telephone poles lean quietly under the Nebraska sky. But then, you see one building still alive, the Monowi Tavern. Inside, Elsie Eiler greets visitors with a smile and a cold beer. She's 80-something years old, but she still works 6 days a week, cooking burgers and pouring drinks. For many travelers, meeting Elsie feels like stepping into living history. They take selfies with her, listen to her stories, and sign her guest book as proof they've been to America's tiniest town. Some visitors even bring souvenirs from their own countries to leave behind, turning the tavern into a kind of global scrapbook. And despite being the only resident, Elsie isn't completely alone. Her tavern is often full of people. Locals from nearby villages, truck drivers passing through, or journalists fascinated by her story. Each year, she still completes the paperwork required by law. She approves her own liquor license, signs off on the annual budget, and even applies for federal funding, writing her name on every line. When asked if she finds it funny to be both mayor and citizen, she laughs. Well, the meetings are short. That humor is part of why people love her story so much. In a world where cities are getting bigger and more crowded, Monowi feels like the complete opposite. It's a place where silence speaks louder than noise. And yet, that silence has made Monowi world famous. News outlets from BBC to the New York Times have covered Elsie's story. Documentaries, YouTubers, and travel bloggers make the long trip just to show their audiences the one-person town. Monowi has become more than on the map, it's a symbol. A reminder of how America's rural towns rose, declined, and yet, somehow, one woman kept her community alive. And perhaps the most surprising part? Monowi isn't sad. It's quirky, funny, and inspiring, a place where the last woman standing became a legend. Monowi is not just a place, it's a cultural phenomenon. Around the world, people are fascinated by the idea of a town with only one resident. In an era where cities grow into megacities with millions of people, Monowi feels like the punchline of a cosmic joke. A whole town, run by one grandma. That contrast makes Monowi endlessly shareable on social media. TikToks, memes, and travel vlogs all highlight Elsie's one-woman government. It's funny, yes, but it also taps into something deeper. Monowi represents resilience, the ability to hold on when everything else has faded away. People admire Elsie not only because her story is quirky, but because it's inspiring. She proves that community isn't about numbers, it's about spirit. Travelers who visit Monowi often describe it as surreal. You drive for hours through empty plains, expecting to find nothing, and suddenly there's a tavern with a neon sign glowing in the night. Inside, laughter and conversation make you forget that technically you're in a ghost town. In fact, many call Monowi the friendliest ghost town in America. Beyond tourism, Monowi has become a subject of academic interest too. Professors and sociologists cite it as an extreme case of rural depopulation in the U.S. Yet they also point out how its survival, thanks to Elsie, gives it cultural weight far beyond its size. For many Americans, Monowi has become a symbol of nostalgia. It reminds them of small towns their grandparents lived in, where life was slower and simpler. For others, it's a bucket list destination, because how often do you get to drink a beer in a one-person town? Monowi has even been featured in documentaries, late-night comedy shows, and international travel programs. The tavern's guest book, with thousands of signatures, is living proof that Monowi, against all odds, matters. And at the center of it all is Elsie Eiler, a woman who became a folk hero simply by staying put. She didn't chase fame, but fame found her. And thanks to her, Monowi will always be more than on the map. It's a story that makes people smile, laugh, and reflect. Monowi is proof that sometimes, truth is stranger than fiction. A legally recognized American town, with only one resident. Elsie Eiler is not just the mayor, she's the heart, the soul, and the spirit of Monowi. Through her, the town lives on, not as an empty place on a map, but as a living story that people around the world come to see. Her tavern is more than a bar, it's a symbol of resilience, humor, and the quirky charm of small-town America. And while most people wouldn't dream of living alone in an entire town, Elsie shows us that sometimes, one person really can keep a whole community alive. So the next time you look at a map of the United States and see a tiny dot called Monowi, remember, it's not just it's a legend. Now here's the question for you. If you had the chance, would you live in a town all by yourself? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, because in the next episode, we'll uncover another strange and wonderful story that could only happen in America.